Selamat sejahtera and hi. We are students from BEES 3033 History of Economy Thought Group B. Here's Group 3 to discuss about the German Historical School, 5 major questions and contributions of Friedrich List, Wilhelm Roscher, and Gustav Schmoller in developing the ideas of the school. Our lecturer is Dr. Junaida Hassan. I am Kawilun and my metric number is 278854. The rest of Group 3 members that presented are Wong Yong Xian, metric number 279176, Goh Hui Chi, metric number 278244, Mohammed Nazrin bin Matnawi, metric number 270331, Ko Kai Shen, metric number 278378, and Noha Adina Zara, metric number is 7022X7. First, let's start with our introduction.
Hi, my name is Noha Adina Zahra. My matric number is 70228N7. In this chapter, we consider the German historical school, which rose in 1840s with the publication of Friedrich List and Wilhelm Roscher and ended in 1917 when Gustav Schmoller died. By then, economists in general had absorbed some of the ideas of the school, and the school no longer exists as a distinct entity. Like the socialists, the German historical economists were generally critical of classical economics. Following an overview of the school, we developed the ideas of the school's main thinkers, List, Roscher, Schmoller, and Weber.
A very good day to Dr. Junaida. I'm Goh Hui Chi, and my metric number is 27844, and today I'm going to present about the historical background of the German historical school. So firstly, we can see and we can know that Germany is divided into 39 separate states after the Napoleonic Wars, which is from 1830 until 1832 as well. And most of these separate states, most of them are monarchical and undemocratic. So now, what is monarchical and what is undemocratic? As we know that monarchical is a society that ruled by a king or a queen, while the undemocratic is the society are not agreeing the democracy practice or idea as well. So next, the vigorous great powers of Europe manipulated Germany to promote their own ulterior purpose. So the German struggle against Napoleon had aroused patriotic and nationalistic emotions, and many Germans demanded unification and constitutional reform. But the quest for national unity was frustrated for half a century. So the aspirations of at that time they hope toward democracy remained unrealized for over a century until they just briefly achieved under the most adverse conditions, which is after they're losing the War I. Okay, after this, in 1815, Holy Alliance of Prussia, Austria, and Russia was organized as a means of defeating revolution wherever it might be threatened. And now we talk about the Prussia, which is the largest, richest, the most militaristic and most powerful state in Germany, and they also dominate the country. So because of all these characteristics that Prussia have, so other countries, or we can know that is other foreign countries would or saw that Prussia as a powerful ally, and they also conservatives saw in Prussia a bulwark against democracy and socialism. Okay, and next, about the advanced social legalism was enacted by Bismarck and this expressed the paternalism of the monarchy and evoked loyalty and patriotism among the German workers. And he also break that the revolution in Germany is made by the king. And at that time, German historical school defend and rationalize the German ways of life by questioning the historical relevance of the British classical economic doctrines by the Laissez-faire. Okay, and the British theory was observed inapplicable to the situation in Germany, and competition and freedom of enterprise at that time were restricted in Germany. So now, for mercantilist regulations, still persist or still continue in Germany, at least until the formations of empire in 1871, long after they had disappeared from British stage as well. And for example, Friedrich List suggested a high tariff against import of manufacturing goods to protect newly emerging domestic industry, which is also infant industry as well. So Germany also gave birth to the historical school. Was divided weak and primarily agricultural. These situations lead to the incorporation of the spirit of nationalism, patriotism, militarism, paternalism, and massive government interventions to change the pattern and industrial growth as well. And because Germany of the middle 19th century, there's far behind England in the development of industry and its economics reasons that government assistance was required for it to catch up. So that's all from my presentation today. And I will pass the next presentations to the next member to present or discuss about the major tenets of the German historical school.
Hello, my name is Muhammad Nazrimi Maknawi. Metric number is 270321. So I will continue the presentation to the next topic, which is about the major tenet of the historical school of German. Before we go through to the first point, we need to know first what is tenets. So basically, tenet is a principle of belief, especially one of the main principles of a religion or philosophy. So there are four major tenets of the historical school. The first one is evolutionary approach to economics. Historical school apply a dynamic evolutionary perspective. It study of society. It concentrates on cumulative development and growth. An analogy was sometimes drawn to the Darwin evolutionism in biology. So the social organism is born, develop and grow, and finally decay and dies. Society is constantly changing. This relative approach was especially useful in attacking classical economics as being unsuitable for Germany. The second tenet of the historical school is emphasis on the positive role of government. Historical school was nationalist, whereas classical economy was individualist and cosmopolitan. If the social organism is the center of study, it's for the force of dynamic movement when the society and the state can occupy the center of the stage rather than individual. The next tenet of historical school is inductive approach. Before this, the economic of the historical school emphasis the importance of the studying history of economy, because economic and other social phenomena are interdependent. Political economy cannot be treated adequately except in combination with other branch or social science. The last major tenet of the historical school is advocate of conservative reform. Politic economy said the historical economists must not merely analyze motives that prompt economic activity, but must compare the moral of this action and their outcome. It must determine the standard of the proper production and distribution of wealth so that the demand of justice and morality are satisfied. So we continue with the next presenter. Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Wong Yong Sen and my metric number is 279176. Today I want to present the part is whom the historical benefit or seek to benefit. They have two groups of people get the historical benefit. They are members of the German Historical School and dominant business, financial and landowning groups. First is the members of the German Historical School. They have good relationships with government officials. They reach to a position that dominates academic life. Next, most universities were controlled by the German government and the majority of academic appointments were in charge by Schmoller, also known as the Professor Maker at the Prussian Ministry of Education. Besides, his students and followers were appointed to academic positions, while German members of the Austrian Methodist School were banned from holding positions at universities. The historical school was also beneficial to the German imperial government by upholding the government's role in a nationalistic state. Next is the dominant business, financial and landowning groups. They benefited from the historical economists by advancing reforms that are modest. Rather than fighting their struggles for progress, the poor and humble were granted concessions by a paternalistic. As a result, in Germany, nationalism, loyalty, and servility to the country become more prevalent.
The next major question is, how was the historical school valid, useful, or correct in its time? The first one is the evolutionary approach. The evolutionary approach to society and to economic thought, they provided a useful antidote to the abstract thinking of the classical and also marginalist schools. How else could one attempt that to explain Great Britain's adherence to laissez-faire in the 19th century and its considerable departure from it in the 20th century? The historical school was correct in its perspective that the economists needed to familiarize themselves with changing history and changing environments with economic and social evolution in order to understand the present world. For this task, inductive factual studies were required. The new theories and new ideas had to be evoked to understand the new situations. And these new theories and ideas require careful testing through the use of empirical data.
Good day, madam. My name is Carl Kai Shen, matrix number 278378. Today, I will be talking about the fifth major questions in our group's topic, which is which tenets of the historical school became lasting contributions. So there are three aspects that are very important under these questions, which is historical inductive method, and the second one, attack on laissez-faire, and also the third one, German nationalism evolved into Franzized militarism. Alright, so we will start from the first one, which is inductive method. Okay, what is an inductive method? Alright, so an inductive method is using a primary sources material to study the changes in social institutions. So this is called as inductive method. So at that time, the economists agreed that historical empirical data which is one of the ways to collect data under this method, is used to explain the present and to test old theories in order to develop new ones. Alright, nowadays, the inductive method has generally accepted as complementary to deductive approach. For example, economics analysis incorporates both abstract theory and also empirical testing in order to develop new ones. Alright, so the economics analysis will use these two things, these two ideas to develop a new theory. So that is for the inductive method. Now let's move on to the second one, attack on laissez-faire. So what is laissez-faire? So the concept of laissez-faire is promoting industry. Okay, under this concept of laissez-faire, there are no restrictions on production. In fact, they emphasize the production of goods. Alright, so at that time, the members of historical school recognized that unrestricted free enterprise does not necessarily brings out the best possible result for the society. Alright, so they started to attack on the concept of laissez-faire. Right, so from this situation or from these issues, you can see that attacking the concept of laissez-faire is the trend of future. Alright, so the members of historical schools believe that reform can be a substitute for worse upheavals brought on by sharpening the class distinctions. So this is the concept of attacking the concept of laissez-faire. Now let's move on to the third one. The third one will be German nationalism advocated by the historical economists overreached itself as it evolved into a franchised militarism. Alright, so during the century of 1914, okay, everyone hoped that the world can achieve peace and also the universal can achieve harmony. But at that time, German historical economists has struck a strident note of nationalism. This strident note has jarred the internationalist sentiment of hoping that the world can achieve peace and harmony. Perhaps that the idea of German nationalism has unintentionally contributed to the World War I and also the World War II. So these are the three tenets of the historical school which became lasting contributions. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Next, I will present the part is the contributions of Friedrich List. First is the life and time of Friedrich List. In the year 1816, he became a government clerk and reached to ministerial under secondary. Next, in the year 1819, at the University of Tübingen, he became a professor of administration and politics. Friedrich List also started involved in seeking a strong German political and commercial union and submitted a request to the Federal Assembly for a customs union. After that, in the year 1820, he has advocated his state legislature and fought for other administrative and financial reforms that were radical at the time. He also advocated for a jury trial, a reduction in the number of civil servants, and a single direct income tax to cover government costs. Friedrich List was deported after serving 8 months in prison because the government considered the expression of this idea to be treasonous. In addition, between the year 1825 to the year 1832, he moved to the United States and lived there and does a lot of work. He worked as a farmer, journalist, business promoter, making and losing a fortune in the coal mining industry. In the United States, his protectionist policies were far more popular than in Germany. Next, in the year 1833, Friedrich List returned to Germany and has become an ardent advocate of a German railway network. Later, railway lines in Germany were to closely follow his depiction in a pamphlet. After that, in the year 1834, the Zollverein was formed as a result of his efforts to establish a German customs union. More than 2 decades after his death, the proposal he outlined for the German postal system and national patent law were implemented. Lastly, in the year 1840, 1846, he committed suicide. This is because of ill health, financial troubles, and sadness about the delay in German unification. Next is the part of protection for infant industry. Friedrich List supported free trade within Germany while advocating for a high tariff on manufactured import because to safeguard newly developing domestic industries. The infant industry argument of tariffs is now a well-known viewpoint. Besides, they have three reasons why the agricultural protection was opposed. The three reasons are because this industry was old and mature. Besides, are because the manufacturing needed low-cost labor and low-cost raw materials. In addition, are because the development of large-scale industry through protection would enlarge the agriculture's domestic market. After that, they have two reasons why for concept Adam Smith and classical economics were harshly chastised by him for professing universality. The reasons are because this was fit for England and not for developing countries. Importance of the state and what history teach us were both heavily emphasized. Next, he popularized the concept of economic growth. Besides that, he also advocated for the government to actively support people who wanted to go from a lower to a higher level to compete with more advanced nations. Lastly, a country could only return to free trade once it had acquired industrial maturity.
I will continue our group presentation. So the next contribution of Friedrich List is deny Adam Smith's notion of the harmony of interest. Friedrich List arguing that private interests of certain members of community do not necessarily lead to the harmony of interests of the society as a whole. If a whole nation follows to be rich by extreme parsimony, there will be no consumption and no support of industry. National unity is necessarily to the individual was subordinate to the preservation of this oneness. So the next contribution of Friedrich List is productive power. So military preparation, war and war debts may in certain cases immensely increase in the productive power of a country. So war expand its productive power so much it can be increased value passive annually. Spending money on supplying its army, shipping goods on the theater of war that ruin foreign manufacture and ensure England industrial supremacy. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, so now I will present about Wilhelm Roscher, which he is born at 1817 and lived until 1894 or died on 1894 as well. So he was one of the older historical school, and which is this older historical school wanted to supplement classical theory, whereas the younger school wished to supersede its entire with historical studies and policy considerations. So Roscher became a professor of political economics at Göttingen and Laissez-faire, and he also written a book which is the name is Economic Science, and he took about 40 years, which is from 1854 until 1894, about 40 years to complete this book, and this book was widely used in German schools. Okay, although Roscher reputed the classical economics that he had learned in his young, he still built upon those ideas. This was the basics for younger historical schools, conventions of the older foreign runners. So, for example, Schmoller held that Roscher and his associates had criticized classical economics and its methods effectively, but when it come to reconstructing, they had themselves lapsed into the methods that they had formerly condemned.
About the history method, Wilhelm Roscher, by using the historical method from the investigation of history's legal, political, and also other aspects, he tried to establish the laws of economic development. And he called the method historical, that in contrast to the philosophical or idealistic method. He contended that the object of political economy is to describe the actual state at which the economy has already arrived through continual development, but not to establish the best possible state of things only. Roscher, he added that the knowledge that gained through the use of the historical method that does away with feelings of self-sufficiency, and that higher civilizations will not look down with contempt on lower ones. And the societies are continually evolving from immature to mature forms, which may be considered as the most perfect. So on, the mature societies that, however, eventually decline and decay. Next, I'm going to talk about Wilhelm Roscher's historical basis of deductive method. Wilhelm Roscher, he showed his affinity to economic theory in his book, Principles of Political Economy, by including a simplified version of English classical price theory. He sought to discover its historical basis instead of disdaining abstract theory. He also asserted that the study of contemporary facts and also opinions is essential agent to the classical deductive method.
So, have you seen or know before who's in the picture? Yeah, this picture is Gustav von Schmoller, born in 1838 and died in 1917. To know better about Gustav von Schmoller, so I will explain it. Gustav von Schmoller, born in 24 June 1838, and place of birth is Helbron, Germany, died in 27 June 1917 at the age 79 at Bad Herzog, Germany. Schmoller was the leading figure of younger historical school. He was a professor of political science at Halle, Strasbourg, and Berlin. Schmoller was an active member of the Academy of Science and also of the House of Lords of the Prussian Diet. He was a founder and major leader of the Verein für Sozialpolitik, or Association of Social Policy. What is Association of Social Policy? This organization advocates social legislation and helps promote the idea of greater government activity in social and economic affairs. Also, Schmoller wanted to develop economics exclusively on the basis of historical monographs, and Schmoller was very antagonistic to deductive methods, as he is one of the scholars that contributes inductive approach in economics. The Methodenstreit is about Schmoller engaged in a famous controversy with Karl Menger, founder of the abstract Austrian marginalist school, as to which is more fruitful, inductive or deductive analysis. This debate was named the Methodenstreit, or the Battle of Method. First, we talk about the deductive method. So, the analytical and abstract approach pioneered by David Ricardo, and Ricardo began with basic premises and then used logic to deduce generalization. His tendency is to use assumption to bolster his arguments, and The method of partial equilibrium analysis, championed by many members of marginalist school, was useful for abstracting from the complexity of the real world in order to better understand it. So, this deductive method approach first allowing one variable at a time to change while holding all other variables temporarily constant, and second is enable the investigators to dissect complex phenomena one step at a time. Next, we talk about inductive method. Inductive method emphasizes the importance of studying the economy inductively or historically, like example from part to the whole, from particles to general, and from facts to theories. Because economic and other social phenomena are interdependent, political economy cannot be treated adequately except in combination with other branches of social science. Inductive studies use primary source material and study trends in social institutions. And German historical story claimed that its historical method allowed it to study all the force of an economic phenomenon and all the phases of economic behavior, not merely their economic logic.
Next, I would like to talk about the storyline of Methodenstreit. The battle began when Menger had published a book on methodology. He defended that deductive method is the best and rated inductive method as merely secondary in importance. Karl Menger also said that the historians have stepped upon the territory of our science like foreign conquerors. They force us to use their language, their customs, their terminologies, and also their methods. Therefore, they urge us to fight intolerantly by not corresponding to their special method. On the other hand, Schmoller received the book that published by Menger. He reviewed the book unfavorably in his Jahrbuch. When Menger knows the reaction of Schmoller, he replied in an angry pamphlet titled Errors of Historicism. When Schmoller received the pamphlet from Menger, which is Errors of Historicism, he made an announcement. He said that he was unable to review it because he returned it immediately to the author, which is Karl Menger. Schmoller also printed the insulting letter to Menger, and here comes to the end of the battle. In the end, economists believe that deductive method and inductive method are both important as they normally supplement each other. So for example, the econometric analysis normally incorporate both abstract theory and empirical testing in order to create a new theory. So that's all for the story of the Methodenstreit. Next, I would like to talk about the social reform. Schmoller believed that ethical value judgment should be encouraged because justice in the economic system could be achieved through paternalistic policy of social reform by the state and all social groups. The guiding principle of social reform is a more equitable distribution of income. So, from the perspective of Schmoller, he thinks that it is fairer to everyone, it is fairer to each of us. Besides, Schmoller also accused older historical school of attempting to apply the lessons of history too quickly. Although he and his students has published a lot of historical studies, but at the end they failed to produce an economic theory. So their major contribution just lay in the area of economic history. Last but not least, I would like to talk about the protectionism. In 1901, Schmoller favored a protective tariff from Germany. He hailed Alexander Hamilton and Friedrich List as his teachers. He justified tariffs on the basis of List's infant industry argument and goes further on it. He thinks that tariff is an international weapon that might benefit a country if it is being used skillfully. Although Schmoller supports free trade in his younger age, but he changed his views on protectionism late in his life. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Guys, finally, we are to the conclusion. So the first conclusion is the German Historical School, or GHS, rose in 1840s with the publication of Friedrich List and Wilhelm Roscher and ended in 1917 when Gustav Schmoller died. So the second conclusion is GHs in general were critical of classical economics. They criticized the abstract, deductive, statistic, analytic, and unhistorical qualities of classical and marginalist methodology. And the third conclusion is they suggested the use of evolutionary and inductive method in economic analysis and emphasized government intervention in the economy through conservative reform. The fourth, the German historical economists tried to improve the situation of ordinary people by improving their health status, living standard, and efficiency as factory workers. And the last conclusion is, as a result, the combination of nationalism, patriotism, militarism, paternalism, devotion to duty and hard work, and massive government intervention not only promote the industrial growth in Germany, but also strengthen the loyalty of workers and ordinary people to the state and prevent them from supporting the socialist ideology.
That's all the presentation of our group. Thank you for paying attention to watching our video.